Poor girl wrote help on the bill, the mafia boss at the next table, noticed before the waiter. The jazz wasn't soothing. It was a nervous pulse under the skin of the restaurant, a low thrumming that matched the anxiety beating in my own throat. Saffron and slate, even the name sounded expensive, like spices I couldn't afford and a countertop I'd only ever wipe down. Amber light bled across the dark wood, catching the rim of my water glass and the cheap, acidic white wine I hadn't touched in 20 minutes. It was a $5 glass of regret. I sat coiled in the booth, my legs pulled up, trying to make myself small. The fabric of this borrowed dress, a silky, navy blue thing that wasn't me, scratched the back of my neck. I was Wren Calloway, 23 years old, and as of 9 o'clock this morning, formerly employed, fired from the bakery. My stomach didn't just rumble. It felt like it was trying to digest itself. A hollow, aching cramp that started below my ribs and ended somewhere in my knees, making them weak. I kept my left hand in my lap, sliding my thumb into the worn leatherette of my wallet. I didn't need to look. I'd counted it 4 times in the bathroom, hiding in a stall that smelled like bleach and roses, a $5 bill, 2 ones, and a palmful of sticky quarters and dimes, maybe $8.50 in total, enough for the lukewarm tomato soup sitting half-eaten in front of me, but not enough for the taxi. The thought sent a fresh jolt of cold, sharp panic through the hunger. Arbor Key. My apartment building smelled like damp concrete and old cooking oil, but it was home, and my landlord, Mr. Sokolov, had been very clear when I'd seen him this afternoon. If the back rent wasn't on his desk, the chain was on my door. Midnight. He'd said it exactly like that. Midnight. I checked the ornate clock over the bar. It was already 10:15. The waiter, a young man with a tragically optimistic bow tie, materialized at my elbow. He placed the small, black leather folder on the table with a polite, practiced smile that didn't reach his eyes. "No rush, miss." But there was a rush. The air in my lungs was rushing out, leaving me dizzy. I opened the folder, $9.72 for the soup and the single glass of wine, plus tax, plus the tip I couldn't afford to leave. I was short. Even if I paid, I'd be short for the taxi. I'd be walking. It was at least 4 miles, and the night air was cold enough to bite. My hand was shaking, not a little tremor, but a visible, embarrassing quake that rattled the pen against the table. I gripped the cheap ballpoint pen the restaurant provided, my knuckles white. I turned the receipt over. The back was blank, stark white, a tiny surrender flag. I don't know why I did it. It wasn't a plan. It was a reflex, the last muscle twitch of a cornered animal. My handwriting, usually so neat and looping from piping icing onto birthday cakes, was jagged and small. HELP. Just the 4 letters. I wrote them tiny, right on the bottom edge, near the crease where the paper folded. It was stupid. It was insane. Who would see it? The waiter. He'd just think I was a drunk girl playing a game, or he wouldn't see it at all. But I couldn't stop. I drew a small, quick arrow pointing to the word, then folded the check presenter's flap just slightly, tucking the linen napkin over the edge, hiding the evidence of my own desperation. I stared at the folded napkin, my heart hammering a sick, heavy rhythm against my ribs. I tried to focus on the saxophone. It was a low, mournful sound that seemed to understand my predicament, a bluesy sigh that filled the spaces between the clinking forks. Then the music felt like it snagged. I'd noticed him earlier. Everyone had. You couldn't not notice him. He was in the corner booth, the one reserved for people who owned things, shielded by shadows. He wore a dark coat, but the lapels were velvet, swallowing the amber light and giving nothing back. He looked like he'd been carved from shadow and expensive fabric. He wasn't looking at the saxophonist anymore. He was looking at my table. I'd seen his wrist when he lifted his glass earlier. Whiskey, no ice, a tattoo, not some blurry blue smudge from a drunken night, but sharp, intricate lines, a compass, its needle pointing true north, stark against his skin. Now, his eyes were fixed, not on me, but on the check presenter, on the slightly crooked fold of the linen napkin. My breath caught. He couldn't see the word. He couldn't. It was impossible. It was a paranoid fantasy brought on by low blood sugar. The waiter started moving again, his trajectory aimed straight for me. He was going to pick it up. He was going to see the word, realize I couldn't pay, and the whole fragile performance of me belonging here would shatter. The humiliation burned in my throat. But the man in the corner moved first. He pushed back his chair, the legs silent on the thick rug. He lifted his glass and stood, a fluid motion, as if he were heading for the men's room. He was tall, broader than I'd realized, casting a long shadow that cut across 2 tables. As he passed the waiter, he paused. "Excuse me." His voice was low, smooth gravel, barely a murmur, but it stopped the waiter in his tracks. He didn't stop. His hand, the one without the glass, just swept across my table. It was so fast I barely registered it. His fingers, long and clean, slipped under the leather folder and palmed it. He didn't break stride. 1 second it was there, the evidence of my humiliation. The next, it was gone, held in the hand of this stranger. The waiter stopped, confused, looking at the empty space on my table where the check had been. I looked up. I had to. Our eyes met. It wasn't a glance. It was an impact. His eyes were the color of steel, of the harbor water in winter, a sharp, piercing blue. They weren't warm. They weren't kind. They were impossibly clear, utterly awake, and they saw everything. They saw the borrowed dress, the hunger, the shaking hands, and the stupid, desperate word I'd written. My heart didn't just stop. It seized. It was the feeling of missing the last step on a dark staircase, that stomach-dropping lurch into nothing. Time rewound and snapped forward. The heavy glass front door of saffron and slate opened, chiming softly. But the sound that followed wasn't soft. It was the heavy tread of work boots on hardwood, loud and out of place. I saw the man at the door, the one who looked like he'd been assembled from mismatched boulders, the one who'd been standing near the corner booth all night, move. He wasn't a patron, he was a guard. His face was a map of old scars. He reached the door and, with a quiet, heavy click, turned the deadbolt. He didn't just lock it, he sealed it. 2 new men stepped into the light. They didn't belong here. Their jeans were stained, their baseball caps pulled low, casting their faces in shadow. They smelled like damp wool and engine grease, a scent I recognized from the Kovac union guys who used to harass us for protection money at the bakery. They scanned the room, their eyes hungry and impatient. My blood turned to slush. The man with the steel eyes, Darius Viscari, though I didn't know his name then, was moving. He wasn't walking toward the restroom. He was walking toward the 2 new men. But he took a path that led him directly past my table. He didn't slow down. He didn't look at me. He just leaned in enough for his words to brush my ear, a whisper that was louder than the saxophone, louder than the pounding in my chest. "Don't turn around." I froze, every nerve ending in my body screaming, my spine turning to ice. He continued past me. The receipt was in his hand, but it wasn't a receipt anymore. In the few seconds he'd held it, in the dark, walking, he'd folded it. It was a tiny, perfect origami crane. One of the Kovac men, the one with the thick neck, had planted himself at the bar. He had a glass of water in front of him. Viscari didn't stop, didn't look. He just opened his hand as he passed and let the paper crane drop. It landed with a tiny, soundless splash in the man's water glass. It wasn't an accident, it was a statement, a deliberate, elegant, ice-cold provocation, a declaration. The room fell silent. The saxophone player hit a sour, blatting note and stopped. The man at the bar stared at the paper floating in his glass, the ink, my help beginning to bleed blue into the water. I couldn't breathe. I didn't understand what was happening. I was just a girl who couldn't pay for her soup, but I could feel the air pressure in the room drop, sucked into the vacuum created by this one man. My small, pathetic plea for help hadn't just been seen. It had been answered. And in doing so, it had just thrown me, starving and terrified, straight into the center of a war I never knew existed. The sound of the paper crane hitting the water was tiny, but the silence it created was enormous. The two men at the door, the Kovac union guys, hadn't moved. The man at the bar was staring at the dissolving origami, his face tightening. I was trapped in my booth, a statue of pure fear. I couldn't move my legs. Then the man with the steel eyes, Darius Vescari, was there. He hadn't gone to the bar, he'd stopped. He turned back, moving with an impossible, predatory grace. He didn't just walk to my table, he arrived. He grabbed the back of the chair opposite me and slid it out. The legs made a faint, expensive shushing sound on the rug. He sat down, not heavily, but with intent. His presence was a physical weight. He was broad, his velvet lapel coat spreading, effectively creating a wall between me and the rest of the room. He blocked their view of me, and mine of them. All I could see was him. He leaned forward, not far, but enough to occupy all the air between us. The scent of him hit me not cologne, but something clean, like expensive soap, wool, and the cold night air. "You wrote on my bill," he said. His voice was low, a quiet rumble that vibrated in my chest. It wasn't a question. It was a statement of fact. My throat closed. I couldn't find the air to speak. I just nodded, a tiny, spastic movement. "They saw you," he added, his steel blue eyes holding mine. "The men at the bar. They saw you watching them when they came in. Now they've seen me stop at your table after dropping that message in their water. They think you're with me." "I'm not," I whispered. The words were weak, pathetic. "They don't care," he said, dismissing my reality with a fractional shrug. The panic was a living thing, clawing its way up my throat, tasting like acid and the cheap wine. I need to get home, safe. Tonight, that's all. I don't have enough money for the taxi." My voice cracked on the last word. Humiliation burned hot on my cheeks. I was admitting I was poor to a man who looked like he'd never been poor a single day in his life. His expression didn't change. No pity, no amusement, just that unnerving, absolute focus. He wasn't interested in my poverty. "The money is irrelevant," he said, his voice dropping even lower, forcing me to lean in to hear him. "I'm not asking about your taxi fare. Ren—" My heart stopped. He knew my name. How did he know my name? He must have seen the terror on my face, because he clarified, his gaze flicking down to the soup spoon. "Your name is monogrammed on the napkin ring. W.C. Ren Calloway. You used to work at the Gilded Crumb, 3 blocks over." He knew where I worked, past tense. "I'm not asking about your past," he continued, cutting off my next thought. "I'm asking about now. Who is following you?" "No one," I lied, the word coming out too fast. His eyes narrowed. "The men who just walked in work for the Kovac union. They aren't here for the jazz. You looked at them like you recognized the grave they dug for you. So, I will ask one more time. Who is following you?" The truth spilled out. It was messy, desperate, and stumbled over my lips. "I don't know. I got fired this morning from the bakery. My boss, Jasper Teal, he disappeared 3 days ago. The owners shut the place down. They said he took money." I was rambling, the words tumbling out. He was always nice to me, but he was strange, always worried. About a month ago, he asked me for a favor. He said his credit was bad, that he needed to order supplies. Darius waited. He was perfectly still, listening like a priest in a confessional box built for murderers. He had me sign up for a corporate credit card as an employee, just for the bakery. He said, "For flour and yeast, it was in my name, but the company name, it was Crimson Yeast LLC. He said it was just a holding company name for the new franchise." I stopped, breathing hard. I hadn't told anyone this. The shift in Darius Vescari was subtle, but terrifying. His eyes went from steel to ice. A muscle in his jaw clenched. He knew the name. "Crimson Yeast," he repeated, not to me, but to himself. The name sounded profane in his mouth. "When Jasper vanished," I pushed on, "the bank called me. The bank, not the bakery. They said the card was maxed out. They said there were thousands of dollars in charges, cash advances, money transfers. They said I was responsible. And then those men started showing up. Which men? The ones at the bar, not them, exactly, but men like them, in the same caps. They came to my apartment yesterday. They asked where Jasper was. They asked where the money was. I told them I didn't know. They said they'd be back. That's why I'm here. I was trying to hide until I could figure out how to get to Arbor Key without them seeing me. You weren't hiding, Ren, Darius said, his voice flat. You were sitting in a window booth at the most visible restaurant in Port Halcyon. He looked past me, toward the man with the scarred face at the door. Mace. Crimson Yeast, LLC, Darius said, his gaze returning to me, sharp enough to cut. That isn't a bakery franchise. Ren, it's a shell company. It's a laundry. And it doesn't belong to Jasper Teal. It belongs to the Kovach Union. Your boss wasn't just stealing from the bakery. He was skimming from his partners. And when he ran, he left them with nothing but your name on the paperwork. The world tilted. The tomato soup in my stomach turned to bile. They aren't looking for the money, he said, spelling it out for me. They are looking for the loose end. They are here to clean up Jasper's mess. And you, he tapped a single finger on the table between us, are the mess. I couldn't breathe. My entire life, the last 48 hours, crystallized into one horrifying point. I wasn't just in debt, I was a target. Darius lifted his left hand slightly, tapping the small, almost invisible earpiece he wore. He was listening to something. His eyes unfocused for a second, listening to the man at the door, Mace. His focus snapped back to me. Mace confirms it. Black pickup truck. No plates. Just pulled into the alley behind the kitchen. They're blocking the rear exit. The men at the bar were getting restless. The one whose water I had metaphorically poisoned was scraping his chair back. Darius looked over my head, toward the small stage where the saxophonist was wiping his instrument. He didn't wave. He didn't nod. He just looked. The musician met his gaze, stiffened, and immediately lifted the sax to his lips. The music didn't just resume. It attacked, a loud wailing, chaotic burst of jazz, twice the volume it had been before, deliberately discordant and sharp. It was noise. It was cover. Under the sudden blast of sound, Darius Vascari reached into the pocket of his coat. He placed a small, heavy object on the table. It wasn't a wallet, it was a key. Sleek, black, and heavy, with no teeth. Just a smooth, sculpted piece of metal marked with an unfamiliar silver crest. A key for a car I couldn't even imagine. A Sedna electric coupe. The men at the bar are the distraction, he said, his voice cutting cleanly through the noise. The men in the alley are the muscle. They're going to wait for you to leave. They're going to bundle you into that truck. And you are going to disappear just like your boss, Jasper. He pushed the key an inch toward me. I'm leaving. Mace is at the front door. My car is parked around the corner, in the curator's spot. We are going to walk out of that front door right now. He started to stand. You have two choices, he said, looking down at me. You can stay here, finish your soup, wait for the waiter to come back and deal with your check, and then wait for them. He paused. Or you can pick up that key, stand up, and walk out of here with me. Why, the word was a croak. Why would you help me? His lips thinned. Because the Kovach Union are sloppy. They're parasites, and I don't like what they're doing to my city. And because, he added, his steel gaze landing on the spot where the check had been. You asked. He didn't wait for my answer. He turned and started walking toward the door. The Kovach men were standing up. The man from the bar was moving to intercept him. I was frozen. Stay, die, go, live. He said, you have two choices. But it wasn't a choice. It was a sentence. Stay and be erased, or go with the man who looked like he could erase cities. My hand shot out, my fingers closing around the cold, heavy metal of the key. It felt solid, real. A heavy anchor in a world that had just dissolved. I slid out of the booth. My legs were shaking, but they held me. I stood up. The air was thick with the blaring saxophone, the smell of wine, and a new, sharp scent of violence. The choice wasn't a choice at all. It was a dividing line, drawn on the floor of the restaurant. I looked at the men by the bar, and I looked at Darius Viscari's broad back as he walked toward the door. I stepped over the line. I started to walk. I didn't walk. I stumbled. The seconds after I stood up were a blur of motion and noise. Darius Viscari didn't grab my hand. He just moved toward the kitchen, a decisive, unstoppable force. The Kovac men at the bar saw me. They saw me following him. One of them shouted, a guttural sound that was lost under the wailing saxophone. He lunged, not at Darius, but at me. Before he took 2 steps, Mace, the scarred man from the front door, materialized in his path. I didn't see a punch. I just saw Mace move his shoulder, a solid, heavy impact that sent the man crashing backward into a table of half-eaten desserts. The sound of shattering glass and the man's grunt were swallowed by the music. Darius was already at the kitchen's swinging doors. He shoved them open, pulling me into the chaos of a restaurant's heart. It was a different world, hot, bright, and loud. Stainless steel flashed. Someone yelled in Spanish. The air was thick with saffron, garlic, and the sharp tang of dish soap. "Hey, you can't be in here," a cook shouted, waving a spatula. Darius ignored him. His eyes locked on the heavy steel exit door at the far end of the kitchen. He never broke stride. I had to run to keep up, my borrowed heels slipping on the greasy floor tiles. He shoved the bar on the rear door, and a high-pitched alarm began to blare. It didn't matter. We were out. The cold hit me first, a shocking slap of damp night air. We were in a narrow brick alley, smelling of old rain, dumpsters, and the salt of the Callista Wharf. It was dark, lit only by a single flickering yellow bulb high on the wall. And then I saw it. The black pickup truck. It was parked 20 yards away, blocking the alley's exit, its engine rumbling. The men inside hadn't seen us yet. "This way," Darius commanded. To our left, parked so close to the building it was almost invisible, was the Sedna. It was a long, low coupe, black as polished obsidian, looking more like a shadow than a car. Mace was already there, holding the passenger door open for me. He must have used a different exit. "Get in, now," Mace growled. I didn't hesitate. I threw myself inside, landing on a seat so soft it felt like it was molding to me. The smell of expensive leather and cool, metallic ozone filled my lungs before my door was even closed. Mace was in the passenger seat beside me, and Darius was behind the wheel. The car didn't start. There was no roar of an engine, no vibration. The dashboard just lit up, a clean, white light illuminating a cabin that looked more like a spaceship's cockpit. That's when the truck's headlights flashed on, twin beams of blinding white light that flooded the alley and our car. Tires screamed on the wet cobblestones. The pickup was coming. Darius's hands moved on the wheel. The Sedna shot forward. There was no lurch, no squeal of tires, just a silent, terrifying surge of acceleration that pinned me to the back of my seat. My stomach dropped. We weren't heading for the blocked exit. We were heading for the other end of the alley, a narrow gap between buildings I hadn't even seen. The pickup truck realized its mistake and slammed on its brakes, its back end fishtailing as it tried to reverse. It was too late. We flew through the gap, grazing a dumpster with a sound like a fingernail drawn across slate, and burst onto the wet, lamp-lit street. I looked back through the rear window. The truck roared out of the alley behind us, its massive engine a stark contrast to our electric silence. It was big, heavy, and brutally fast. It swerved into traffic, cutting off a taxi, and fell in right behind us. Its high beams were still on, burning into our mirrors. "They're right on us," I said, my voice a thin, reedy thing. "He knows," Mace said. He was leaning forward, his large, scarred hand tapping a small screen embedded in the dashboard. The screen flickered, showing a rear-view camera feed. Plates are scrambled, engaging counter-optics. "Hold on," Darius said. He still hadn't looked in a mirror. His eyes were fixed on the road ahead. He wrenched the wheel to the left, and the Sedna responded instantly, cutting across 2 lanes of traffic. Horns blared around us. My body was thrown against the door, the seatbelt cutting hard into my collarbone. The pickup truck followed, its heavy frame rolling as it made the turn. But it didn't lose us. Darius seemed completely calm, his hands light on the wheel. He wasn't fighting the car, he was guiding it. He looked at me, his profile sharp in the alternating glow of streetlights and the dashboard. His steel blue eyes were unblinking. Car sick. The question was so normal, so mundane in the middle of this high-speed terror, that a hysterical bubble of laughter rose in my throat. It came out as a choked sob. Life sick. A flicker of something not amusement, but acknowledgement passed through his eyes. He turned his attention back to the road. Then hold on. He accelerated, merging onto the ramp for the Lapis Tunnel. The tunnel was one of the oldest in Port Halcyon, a narrow tube running under the industrial canal, its walls covered in slick, white tiles that reflected the amber lights. The world compressed into a blur of rushing light and the high-pitched, electric whine of our motor. The pickup was right behind us, filling the tunnel, its headlights pinning us. We were trapped in this tube. "Mace," Darius said, his voice level. "Now." Mace tapped his screen again. I heard a faint clack, clack, clack from the rear of the Sedna. Like pebbles being dropped, I chanced to look in the side mirror, a cluster of small, black, multi-pronged objects scattered onto the slick tunnel road, glinting in the lights. Caltrops. The truck was too close, moving too fast to avoid them. The sound was immediate and violent, a rapid series of explosions. Pop, pop, bang! The truck's headlights instantly veered, one pointing at the ceiling, the other at the floor. I saw sparks fly as the wheel rims hit the concrete pavement. The truck shuddered, swerved violently to the right, and slammed head-on into the tiled tunnel wall. It was a sickening crunch of metal. It spun, scraping along the wall, a shower of sparks and broken glass. It came to a rest, sideways, completely blocking both lanes. Steam billowed from its crushed front end. Darius didn't even tap the brakes. He just kept driving. The electric whine of the Sedna the only sound as we shot out of the tunnel and back into the cold. Open night. My body finally remembered to betray me. I started shaking, a deep, uncontrollable tremor that started in my knees and rattled my teeth. My breathing was all wrong. I was gasping, pulling in air but not getting any oxygen. I couldn't stop. My fingers were locked onto the seatbelt strap so tightly they ached. "Breathe, Ren." Darius's voice cut through the fog of my panic. "I can't," I gasped, shaking my head. He moved. I flinched, my body tensing, expecting anything. He took his right hand off the steering wheel and laid it, not on my arm, not on my shoulder, but directly on top of my own white-knuckled hands that were strangling the seatbelt. His hand was warm, impossibly warm and heavy. It wasn't a comforting pat, it was an anchor. It was solid and real. His thumb moved, just once, pressing down on my frantic pulse. "You're not in the tunnel," he said, his voice low and steady, not looking at me. "You are here. They are stopped. Breathe with me. In." He took a slow, deliberate breath. I watched the compass tattoo on his wrist disappear slightly under his cuff. Out. I tried. My breath came out as a ragged, tearing sob. Again, I did it. I matched his rhythm, a long, shuddering inhale that actually filled my lungs. Out. The tremors didn't stop, but the sharp edges of the panic began to dull. He kept his hand there for another 10 seconds, a silent, heavy wait, until my pulse under his thumb slowed from a frantic rabbit's beat to a heavy, terrified thud. Then he returned his hand to the wheel. He took the next turn without a signal, a sharp right that led down a steep ramp I had never noticed before. We dove underground. A faded sign announced the Tidal Industrial Museum, public parking. The garage was vast, empty and cold. The air smelled of damp concrete and decades of dust. He drove to the far corner, past rows and rows of empty spaces. stopping in front of a single, unmarked, brushed steel elevator door. He killed the power. The car went silent. The only light came from the dim, caged safety bulbs on the ceiling. Mace got out. He walked around to my side and opened the door. The air outside the car was cold. I had my purse in my lap, and I realized my old, cracked screen phone was clutched in my left hand. I must have grabbed it when I fled the booth. "The phone," Mace said. His voice was rough. I looked at it. It was my only connection to my old life, to the landlord I owed money to the bakery, to nothing. I handed it to him. He didn't just take it. He turned, walked to a nearby concrete support pillar, and smashed the phone against it. The screen shattered. He smashed it again and again until it was just a handful of plastic and circuits. He dropped the pieces on the ground and kicked them into a drain. Then he reached into his own coat pocket and pulled out a small, black rectangular phone, still in its shrink wrap. "This is yours now," he said, dropping it into my lap. "It's clean. It has 2 numbers in it, his and mine. You do not call anyone else. You do not connect it to any public network." "Understood." I nodded, my throat too dry to speak. Darius stepped out of the car. He looked immaculate. His coat was perfect. His hair was perfect. He hadn't even been breathing hard. He stood in front of me, between me and the elevator, waiting. I slid out of the car, my legs unsteady. The borrowed dress felt cheap and wrinkled. I felt like a stray dog he'd just pulled from the river, dripping and pathetic. He looked at me, his gaze as intense and analytical as it had been in the restaurant. "You're safe tonight," he said. The words were flat, a simple statement of fact. "Mace will show you to the apartment upstairs. This is part of the museum's private collection. No one knows it's here. No one can find you." I just nodded, wrapping my arms around my waist, trying to stop the last of the shivers. "But tonight is the easy part," he continued. His voice was harder now, the ice returning. "Tomorrow is difficult. The Kovac Union just lost a truck and a team because of you, because they think you work for me. They will not stop. They will escalate. Tomorrow, we figure out how to make you too public and too inconvenient for them to kill." I looked up at him. He wasn't offering comfort. He wasn't promising to fix my life or pay my rent. He was telling me the truth, a cold, hard, terrifying truth. Tomorrow is difficult. It was the most honest, most real thing anyone had said to me in weeks. Jasper Teal had drowned me in easy lies. The bank had buried me in fine print. The Kovac men had threatened me with shadows. Darius Vascari, this dangerous stranger, had just handed me the truth like a piece of sharpened steel. It wasn't a comfort. It wasn't a weapon against me. It was just a tool. It was a gift. I nodded again, my chin coming up. I met his steel blue gaze, and for the first time since I'd written that stupid, desperate word on a receipt, I wasn't just afraid. I was listening. The private elevator was silent, a rising, pressurized box. It didn't open into a hallway or a penthouse. It opened directly into a bubble of warm, humid air. We were on the roof. I stepped out onto soft grass, not astroturf, but real, damp grass. Above me, a massive geodesic dome of glass arched against the night sky, raindrops streaking down its hundreds of panes. Port Halcyon glittered below us, a carpet of wet neon, distant and silent. The air smelled of mint, rosemary, and damp, rich earth. It was a greenhouse, a secret garden floating above the city. In the center, a small, modern structure of steel and wood was built around the elevator shaft, part living room, part kitchen. Mace pressed a button on the wall. "The elevator is locked to this floor," he said to Darius. "Not to me. I'll be downstairs, in the garage." He glanced at me, his scarred face unreadable, and then stepped back into the elevator. The steel doors slid shut, leaving me completely alone with him. The silence was deafening, broken only by the rhythmic drumming of the rain on the glass. I was still shaking, the adrenaline from the chase draining away, leaving a bone-deep, exhausted cold. I wrapped my arms around myself, the borrowed dress feeling paper-thin. Darius Vascari watched me for a long moment. He unbuttoned his velvet lapel coat and shrugged it off, draping it over the back of a sleek, low sofa. He was in a simple, perfectly fitted black shirt. The compass tattoo was stark on his forearm. "You're cold," he stated. He walked to the small kitchen area, which was spotless and dark. He didn't reach for a bottle of whiskey. He didn't offer me brandy. And he opened a refrigerator, pulled out a small glass bottle of milk, and then opened a cabinet, retrieving a dark tin. He moved with an efficient, quiet economy. He didn't clatter the pans. In minutes, a low, sweet smell began to cut through the herbal scent of the greenhouse, chocolate. He poured the steaming liquid into 2 heavy ceramic mugs. He brought them over, one in each hand. "Here." I took the mug. The ceramic was hot, a solid, grounding heat that soaked into my frozen fingers. I looked down into the dark, rich liquid, hot cocoa. It was the last thing I expected. It was so normal, so childish. It felt completely insane. As I took it, I saw his hand, the back of his hand, the one that had held the key, the one that had rested so heavily on mine. Just below the knuckles, there was a faint, dusty smear of dark cocoa powder. A sound tore out of my throat. It wasn't a sob. It was a laugh. It was sharp, hysterical, and utterly real. It was the sound of a spring coiled too tight for too long, suddenly snapping. I clapped my free hand over my mouth, the mug shaking, but the laughter wouldn't stop. Darius just stood there, watching me, his expression unreadable. "What?" His voice was flat. "You," I gasped, pointing with my chin. I couldn't stop laughing, even as tears of pure, terrified relief started to burn in my eyes. "You're a mess." He looked at his hand. He registered the dusty brown smudge. His eyes, those cold, analytical, steel blue eyes, tracked from the powder back to my face, to my own hands, which were still pale with the flour and dried dough I hadn't been able to scrub from under my nails before I'd left for the restaurant. He didn't smile, but the tension around his mouth eased, the absolute zero in his gaze warmed by a single, fractional degree. He didn't wipe the cocoa off his hand. "The baker's influence," he said, his voice a low, quiet rumble. He nodded toward the sofa. "Sit, Ren, before you fall." I sat. The cocoa was so sweet it almost hurt, but it was hot, and it pushed back the cold. We sat in silence for a long time, listening to the rain. He didn't press me. He just drank his own cocoa, watching the city lights blur through the wet glass. "My mother," I said, the words coming out before I'd planned them. My voice was rough. "She died 2 years ago." Darius turned his head. He was listening. It was the debt that killed her. That's what it felt like. She got sick. The bills they just kept coming. We sold the house. We sold her car. I was working 3 jobs, but the numbers just got bigger. They were abstract, insane numbers. And one day, she just stopped. She stopped fighting. She said she was tired of being a number. I hate debt. I hate owing anything to anyone. I looked down into my mug. That's why tonight, Mr. Sokolov, the landlord, I couldn't be in debt to him. Not even for one more night. I couldn't lose my apartment because it was the last place that was hers. He finished for me. I nodded, my throat thick. He was quiet for another minute. He set his mug down on the low wooden table. "My brother, Leo," he said. His voice was different, deeper, heavier. He was younger than me, 19. He worked the Firebite Wharf, the cranes. I looked up. Everyone in Port Halcyon knew the wharf. "He was smart," Darius said, staring out at the rain. "He was supposed to be in school, but he was working, trying to save money. He was in the yard, hooking a container. A cable on the number 3 crane snapped. The boom came down. It took him, and 3 other men, with it." He paused. "The Kovach Union has run that wharf for 2 decades. They signed off on every inspection. They took a payout from the operator every month to use faulty equipment and non-union repair crews. The inspectors never even left their cars. My brother, he wasn't killed in an accident. He was murdered for the price of a safety report." He turned those steel eyes on me. That was my oath, Ren. The Kovac Union isn't just a syndicate. It's a rot. It's a parasite that eats from the bottom up, and I will not stop until I have cut it out of this city. My breath hitched. This was his why. The law? I whispered. The police. A dark, humorless expression crossed his face. The law in Port Halcyon is bent like the coastline. The Kovac Union didn't just buy the crane operators. They bought the watchdogs. He leaned forward. There is an agency in this city, the Bureau of Urban Integrity, the BUI. It was formed to fight exactly this kind of municipal corruption, and it is the most corrupt organization in Port Halcyon. Kovac doesn't just pay them for silence, he owns them. He let that sink in. The blood drained from my face. Jasper Teal, he said, connecting the dots I hadn't seen. He wasn't just skimming from the Kovac Union, he was their bagman. Crimson Yeast LLC wasn't just a shell company to launder his own theft. It was the pipeline, the official, documented pipeline he used to move Kovac's money directly to the BUI. I couldn't breathe. The credit card, the charges. Cash advances, Darius said. Transfers, all under your name. You weren't just a witness to Jasper's panic. Ren, you are the entire documented, paper-trailed money chain. You are the physical proof that connects Kovac to the BUI. That's why they sent a snatch team in a black truck. You're not just a loose end. You are the one person who can bring their entire organization down. I felt sick. So what do? You have to hide me. I have to disappear. No, he said, his voice sharp. They own the shadows. They just proved that. If you hide, they will find you. They will tear this city apart until they find you. And they will erase you. We can't fight them in the dark. He stood up, pacing in front of the glass wall, a caged lion. We have to fight them in a different kind of light, he said, a spotlight. He stopped and looked at me. The Viscari Syndicate hosts a charity gala. Every year, it's the single largest philanthropic event in Port Halcyon. Every reporter, every politician, every old money family in this city will be there. What does that have to do with me? I am going to clear this, he said. I'm going to handle the forged debt. I will see to it that Crimson Yeast is exposed. In return, I need you to do the one thing they won't expect. I need you to do your job. My job? I don't have a job. Yes, you do, he said. You're a baker. You will be the featured culinary guest at the gala. You will bake. You will create something. A memory, like you said. And you will tell your story. Publicly, in front of every camera. The fear came back, cold and sharp. You want to use me as bait. You want to paint a target on my back. You are already a target, he countered, his voice rising, passionate. They are trying to kill you tonight, in a dark alley. I'm offering them a different venue, an auditorium, filled with 1,000 witnesses. A dark alley is a grave. Ren. A spotlight is a shield. They cannot make a public figure disappear. They cannot silence a girl who is telling her story on the 6 o'clock news. I am not turning you into bait. I am turning the media mirror on them. When they come for you, they will have to do it with the whole city watching. It was insane. It was brilliant. It was terrifying. Before I could answer, the elevator doors slid open. Mace was back. He wasn't empty-handed. He was carrying a slim, elegant, leather-bound document file. He handed it to Darius. Darius didn't open it. He handed it to me. You're a witness, Ren, he said, but you're also a victim. They didn't just use you. They framed you. My fingers trembled as I opened the file. It wasn't full of legal jargon, it was invoices, hundreds of them, from paper companies, flour suppliers, yeast distributors, all for Crimson Yeast LLC, all paid by the card in my name. And at the back, stapled to a pristine packet, was the credit card application, the one Jasper had given me. I stared at the signature line, Ren Calloway. It wasn't my handwriting. It was close. It was terribly, frighteningly close. The loop of the W, the sharp C, but it wasn't mine. It was a forgery, a sophisticated, precise, and deeply damning forgery. Jasper hadn't just been a nervous manager. He'd been a professional. I looked up from the page, at the man watching me. He had just handed me my life back. I had been running from a debt. I had been hiding from murderers. But this piece of paper changed everything. This was not my debt. This was not my crime. This was my defense. For the first time, hope wasn't a vague wish for a taxi ride. It wasn't a desperate prayer. It was here. It was tangible. It was a transparent, terrifying, solid plan. "Okay," I whispered, closing the file. "I'll bake your cake." The greenhouse on the museum roof was no longer a sanctuary. It was a command center. For 3 days, the world outside ceased to exist. There was only the plan. Darius Vescari did not operate on panic. He operated on logic. The morning after the chase, he brought in the woman who would become my voice. Her name was Sarah Nix. She was not like Darius. She wasn't an intimidating shadow. She was a blade of glass. She wore a perfectly tailored gray suit. Her hair was pulled back so tightly it looked severe, and her eyes missed nothing. She arrived carrying a single, slim briefcase. "Darius has made it clear I am not on his payroll," Sarah said to me, her voice crisp and neutral. We sat at the steel table in the greenhouse, the smell of damp mint surrounding us. "I am an independent arbitrator, retained for you. I am a neutral party." "There are no neutral parties in Port Halcyon," I murmured, repeating what Darius had told me. Sarah's lips thinned in what might have been a smile. "Then let's say I am Switzerland, and I am here to build your public record." The next 48 hours were grueling. We rehearsed my testimony. It wasn't a story, it was a sequence of facts. We recorded every session, with 2 identical recorders running on the table between us. Two-way consent, Sarah called it, legally inviolable. We went over the forged signature on the Crimson Yeast LLC application until my eyes burned. We chronicled every late-night cash deposit Jasper Teal had asked me to make. We listed every suspicious delivery of flour that arrived in unmarked bags. "They will try to discredit you," Sarah warned, her pen tapping a rhythm on her notepad. "They will say you were his lover, that you were in on it, that you are a disgruntled employee." "I was," I said, my voice shaking slightly. "Disgruntled. He fired me, or he vanished. "You are a victim of identity theft," Sarah corrected me, her voice sharp, cutting through my panic. "You are a witness to a conspiracy to defraud the city. You are not an employee. You are not his lover. You are the evidence." "Say it." "I am the evidence," I repeated, my voice gaining a fraction of strength. As we spoke, Darius worked. He explained that my testimony, the recordings, the high-resolution scans of the forged documents, and the bank statements Mace had acquired were all being uploaded. They were sent to something he called the Oriole Vault, a decentralized, encrypted data store, spread across so many servers it couldn't be shut down. "It's untouchable," Darius said. "By the time the gala starts, the truth will already be in 100 places at once." My role was the most visible and the most vulnerable. "You are the shield," Darius explained. He'd arranged for the gala's kitchens to be staffed by a team of charity volunteers. I recognized 2 of them as sous chefs from Port Halcyon's most expensive restaurants. They weren't volunteers, they were his people. They were my bodyguards. "You will be the head pastry chef for the event," he said. "This is not just cover, it is your podium. It is a declaration of your dignity. You are not the girl who wrote help on a bill. You are Wren Calloway, the artisan they tried to erase." The plan itself was simple. Darius called it a clean heist. It wasn't about bullets, it was about exposure. "The goal," he said, pacing the greenhouse as the sun set, "is to force the BUI to show its hand. They cannot, will not, allow you to stand in that spotlight. Telling your story, they will move to silence you. But they are a city agency. They have to use protocol." "They will come to protect you," Sarah added, looking up from her notes. "They will claim you are an endangered witness. They will try to take you into protective custody, which means you will disappear." But they will be doing it at a public event, Darius continued, picking up the thread. And that is where we catch them. Mace was handling the stage. He'd already gained access to the title hall. Tiny cameras, Mace grunted, showing me a schematic. Pinhole, high definition, hidden in the charity banners, in the floral arrangements, in the ice sculptures. The entire dessert station will be a live studio. Where does the feed go? I asked. To the Oriole Vault, Darius answered, and to a private encrypted channel. It will broadcast on a 60-second delay. A delay. If they find the cameras and cut the feed, Mace explained, the world still sees the last full minute of whatever they were trying to stop. It's a dead man's switch. But the plan had a secondary, more elegant trap, the centerpiece of the charity auction. A wedding cake? Darius said. 5 tiers. Magnificent. A testament to your skill. It will be hollow, I stated, understanding the logic. Exactly, he said. And inside we place the bait. He laid out a second, pristine, paper-clipped stack of the Crimson Yeast documents, the forged application, the bank statements, the cash advance receipts. The BUI won't just come for you, Darius said. They will come for the evidence. They will try to seize it, to secure it, and when they do, our cameras will be rolling as the deputy director of the Bureau of Urban Integrity is filmed physically confiscating the proof of his own corruption, his hands on the evidence, broadcast to the world. To ensure the right audience, Darius had sent formal invitations delivered by courier, not just to the city's elite, but to the front-page investigative reporter for the Halcyon Lantern and to the entire board of the Port Authority Ethics Committee. We are inviting the watchdogs to watch the wolves, he'd said. While they built the trap, I baked. I was moved from the greenhouse to the massive, gleaming kitchens of the title hall, surrounded by Mace's hand-picked team. I finally felt my hands stop shaking. I knew. The cool dust of flour, the smell of melting butter, the precise chemical magic of yeast and sugar. The wedding cake was theater. My real weapon was the featured dessert. I called it the honey cinder torte. It was my story, told in layers, a foundation of dark, almost burnt honey caramel, for the bitterness of the debt in the back alleys, a light, resilient layer of salted almond sponge, for the memory of my mother and the air from the wharfs, and atop a pure, simple, unadorned vanilla bean cream, the menu card, printed on heavy stock, would describe the layers. It would describe the inspiration. It was my testimony, baked into existence. But as I worked, folding, piping, and plating, the fear was a cold knot in my stomach. I was surrounded by Viscari's people. I was his showpiece. I was terrified of being seen as nothing but a public relations doll, a puppet for his war. I said as much to him. Late on the second night, we were alone in the kitchen, the ovens cooling with soft ticking sounds. He took my name, I whispered, my voice rough. Jasper. He forged it. Now you're putting it up in lights. What's the difference? Darius was silent for a moment. He stepped closer, not touching me, but close enough that I could feel the warmth radiating from him. The difference, Wren, he said, his voice low and intense, is that Jasper stole your name. He used it to hide. I am giving yours back to you. You are not standing on that stage to tell my story. You are standing there to tell yours. This is not a performance. This is a reclamation. The night before the gala, the preparations were complete. The greenhouse was quiet again, the rain tapping softly on the glass dome. I was staring at the dress Sarah had procured for me, a simple, elegant baker's coat of pure white linen, with WC embroidered on the collar. Darius was there, but he was distant, standing by the glass, looking down at the glittering city. We have a problem, he said, without turning around. My blood chilled. The BUI Kovac. Inside, he said. My team. A man named Iago Trent. He's been compromised. Kovac got to him. Then stop it, I said, rushing to his side. Shut it down. It's too dangerous. No. He turned, and his face was hard. We knew this was a possibility. We used the rat to follow the trail to the nest. The plan holds. Iago will lead them right where I want them. He was risking it. He was risking me. He saw the fear in my eyes. He took a step closer, and the look on his face was one I hadn't seen before. It wasn't the steel of the restaurant or the calculation of the planner. It was something heavier, something almost vulnerable. "Ren," he said, and his voice was soft, almost a whisper. "This is not a perfect plan. It is a loud one, and it is dangerous. If they get to me, if Iago or someone else makes a move, and I fall, you do not stop." My heart hammered against my ribs. "What are you talking about?" "You keep going," he insisted. His eyes held mine, a low, soft command. "You find Sarah. You get to the microphone. You tell your story. This plan works because of you, not because of me. You are the one who is bulletproof tomorrow night, Ren. I am not." I stared at him. It wasn't an order. It was a transfer of power. It was a soft-spoken last will and testament. He was placing his entire bloody war against the Kovac Union directly into my flour-dusted hands. I found my voice. "If you fall," I whispered, "I keep going." The title hall was not a room. It was a captured piece of the night sky, suspended over the black, churning water of the harbor. The entire western wall was a seamless curve of glass, 3 stories high and thousands of tiny, pinpoint lights hung from the ceiling like a captured constellation. The air was warm, thick with the smell of expensive perfume and the low, civilized roar of hundreds of voices. Donors dripped with jewels. Politicians navigated the crowd with camera-ready smiles, and the sharks, the reporters, circled the bars. I stood behind my station, a long marble slab displaying 200 identical plates of the honey cinder torte. In the center, under its own soft spotlight, sat the 5-tiered, hollow wedding cake, the bait. I felt utterly exposed. My white linen chef's coat, the one Sarah had procured, felt as thin as paper. The WCL embroidered over my heart was a target. My hands, resting on the cool marble, were perfectly still. My stomach, however, was a cold, tight knot of ice. I scanned the room, my heart hammering a nervous rhythm. I found him. He was standing near the main doors, not mingling but watching. Anchoring the room, Darius Vescori wore a black tuxedo, tailored so perfectly it looked more like armor than clothing. But as promised, he wore no tie. His collar was open at the throat, a stark, defiant absence of formality that made him look more dangerous. Not less, he was raw energy in a polished room. Our eyes met across the expanse. He didn't smile, he didn't gesture. He just gave one slow, almost imperceptible nod. The plan was live. I nodded back. The music, a live jazz quartet, was smooth and expensive. The calm shattered at exactly 8:30, just as the auctioneer was walking toward the stage. They didn't use the service entrance. They came through the front doors, a wedge of dark blue suits that parted the sea of gowns and tuxedos. Leading them was a man I'd only seen in photographs, Deputy Director Kellen Price. He had a thin, artificial smile pressed onto his face and hair so perfect it looked like a plastic helmet. He carried a leather folio, and he walked with an air of absolute, unassailable bureaucratic authority. He wasn't walking toward Darius. He was walking directly toward me. "Miss Ren Calloway," he asked. His voice was bright, oily, and loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. "I am," I said. The hidden cameras and the banners were rolling. "Deputy Director Kellen Price, Bureau of Urban Integrity." He flashed a badge, but didn't give me time to read it. He opened his folio. "We have a warrant, Miss It, to secure pertinent financial evidence related to an ongoing investigation into a fraudulent entity known as Crimson Yeast, LLC. The name dropped into the polite murmur of the crowd like a boulder. Silence spread out from my table. He knew I was here. He knew about the cake. Iago Trent, the mole, had done his job perfectly. "Director," I said, my voice surprisingly steady, "this is a dessert station. As you can see, The only things here are tortoise and a display cake. Price's smile didn't waver. Our intelligence suggests the evidence is contained within your display. He gestured to the hollow wedding cake. We are here to impound that item and the rest of these items as evidence. Two of his agents, both men built like industrial freezers, moved to flank my table. They were looming over the plated desserts. Sarah Nix materialized at my elbow, a blade of gray silk. Director Price, Sarah Nix, counsel for Miss Calloway. On what grounds are you seizing perishable food items? This warrant is for financial documents. This is an active crime scene, counsel, Price snapped, his smile thinning. This is a charity gala, director, Sarah countered, her voice like ice. The reporter from the Halcyon Lantern was already moving in. His photographer lifting a camera. Price was being boxed in by the publicity he hadn't counted on. He fumbled, pulling a blank form from his folio. An evidence receipt. He shoved it across the marble at me. This is just procedure. Miss Calloway, sign this. It's a standard release, acknowledging we are securing the items. I looked down at the paper. Every line was blank. I'm not signing a blank form, I said. Price's mask of politeness cracked. Sign the form, he hissed, leaning closer, or I will have you arrested for obstruction of a federal investigation. Right here, right now. Director Price. Darius's voice. It wasn't loud. It didn't have to be. It cut through everything. He hadn't rushed. He was just suddenly there, standing on the other side of the table, a solid, immovable object. He placed himself between Price and the wedding cake. He didn't even look at Price. He was looking at the two large agents who were hovering over the honey cinder tortoise. Gentlemen, Darius said, his voice dangerously polite, I must advise you, you are both currently in violation of the Port Halcyon Public Health Code, Section 42B. The agents froze, looking at each other, confused. Price's head snapped toward Darius. You're standing in a designated food-safe preparation zone, Darius continued, his voice calm, as if discussing the weather. You are not wearing hairnets, gloves, or any other required sanitation credentials. Your suits, your proximity. You are contaminating the primary food items for a charity auction. The silence in the hall was absolute. Price looked like he'd been slapped. This is a BUI matter, Price snarled. This is a public health matter, Darius replied, his voice still level. And as the host of this event, I cannot permit the health of my guests to be compromised by unsanitized interference. He gestured to the two agents. Please step back behind the velvet rope, or I will be forced to ask the city health inspectors, who I believe are enjoying cocktails by the bar, to formally cite you. It was a masterstroke. He hadn't threatened them. He hadn't touched them. He had used their own rule book against them. He'd turned the BUI into a hygiene problem. The Lantern reporter pounced. Director Price, are you aware you're contaminating a food source? Is this standard BUI procedure? Price's face was a mottled, furious red. He was trapped. He looked at Darius with pure, unadulterated hatred. He violently signaled his two agents. Back off, he snarled. Secure the perimeter. The agents stumbled back, humiliated. The crowd was buzzing, whispering. They didn't know the full story, but they knew they'd just seen the BUI lose. Price had lost control. This was my moment. I stepped to the side, to the small lectern intended for the auctioneer. I tapped the microphone. A soft thump-thump echoed through the hall. Every eye in the room swiveled to me. Price, the reporters, the donors, and Darius. I gripped the sides of the lectern. My hands were shaking, but my voice, when it came out, was strong. My name is Wren Calloway, I said into the silence. I'm the baker who made these desserts. Director Price is right. I am involved in the Crimson Yeast case. I've been hiding for 3 days because the people he works for, the people in the BUI, tried to have me killed. A collective gasp swept the room. This woman is delusional, Price shouted, lunging for the microphone. She is a person of interest. She is a flight risk. May stepped in front of him, a scarred wall of muscle. I didn't back away. I am a victim, I said, my voice rising. amplified, filling the massive hall. My former boss, Jasper Teal, forged my name to a credit card application. I held up the document Sarah had given me. He used my name to open a shell company, a company that was used to launder money for the Kovac Union and to pay bribes directly to officials inside the Bureau of Urban Integrity. The accusation hung in the air, electric and toxic. The social media feed for the gala was exploding. I had said the words. I had connected the dots in public. "Seize her!" Price screamed at his men, his composure gone. "She is obstructing justice. She is under arrest." The agents moved. Mace moved. Darius braced himself, ready to intervene. But everyone stopped. A new voice cut through the chaos from the back of the room. "Ren, thank God." I turned, my heart stopping. There, standing near the service doors, looking pale, thin, and terrified, was Jasper Teal, my old boss. He looked exactly like the victim I had once believed he was. "Ren, you have to get out of here," he yelled, his voice cracking with manufactured panic. "They're trying to frame us, both of us. I have a car. Come with me. Now." This was it, the counter move. Iago had told them the plan, and this was their answer. Not to fight me in the light, but to lure me back into the shadows. He wasn't a victim. He was a partner. He was here to retrieve the evidence and the witness. He locked his eyes on mine, ignoring everyone else, and jerked his head toward the exit. "Come with me." Mace saw the signal. He saw Teal. He put his hand on the small of my back, ready to pull me to safety. "Miss Calloway, stay here. He's not safe." I looked at Teal, at the man who had smiled at me every day while he methodically ruined my life, the man who had signed my name on the document that had almost gotten me killed. I felt the ice that I'd heard in Darius's voice flood my own veins. I put my hand on Mace's forearm. He stopped, looking at me, surprised. I shook my head, just once. "It's okay, Mace," I said, my voice calm. "Let me talk to him." I took a step forward, away from Mace's protection, away from Darius's spotlight, and directly toward my past. I was done being moved. I was done being hidden. I was going to be the one who walked. I moved toward the service corridor, my footsteps sounding too loud in the sudden, electric hush. The opulent, chaotic noise of the gala, the music, the shouting. The panic was behind me. Here, in this dimmer, wood-paneled hallway, it was quiet. Jasper Teal was waiting, his back to a set of heavy mahogany doors, his face pale and slick with sweat. He looked like the rat he was, cornered and desperate. When he saw me walking toward him, alone, his face flooded with a grotesque, counterfeit relief. "Ren, thank God," he hissed, rushing forward. He grabbed my arm, his fingers digging into my bicep, hard. It hurt. "I knew you'd understand. We have to go. Price is a monster. He's taking us both down." He started pulling me toward the doors. His grip was frantic. "I didn't forge anything. Ren, I swear, I was trying to protect you. The Kovac, they're animals. They made me. I have a car waiting in the alley. I have train tickets. We can be 2 states away by morning. We just have to go. Right now. We can escape." Escape. The word echoed in my head. It was the same word I had written on the bill. The word that had defined my existence for 3 days. But hearing it from his lips, it sounded foul. It sounded like a cage. I stopped walking. I planted my feet. My shoes, simple black flats Sarah had provided, skidded slightly on the polished marble. He tugged hard. "Ren, move! What are you doing?" I yanked my arm from his grasp. The suddenness of the movement, the strength of it, surprised us both. He stared at me, his mouth open, the terrified victim mask dissolving into raw, ugly confusion. "No, Jasper," I said. My voice was low. It didn't tremble. "What?" he snarled. "What are you talking about? We don't have time. They'll arrest us both. They'll—" "No," I repeated, stepping back from him. "I'm done running for you. I'm done being the ghost in your machine." I thought of the honey cinder tort, of the people in that room, of the cameras, of the man who had given me a choice. I cook for people now. Jasper, I am not cooking the books for your debts anymore. His face, which had been pale with fear, flushed a deep, blotchy red with rage. The real Jasper Teal finally showed up. "You stupid little girl," he spat, lunging for me. "You think he's going to save you?" He jerked his chin back toward the gala. That animal. You're a pawn. Ren, you're my pawn." He grabbed for my wrist, his fingers like claws. I flinched, a scream rising in my throat, a genuine hot spark of fear. A shadow fell over us. Darius Vescari was just there. He had moved with the silence of a panther, covering the 30 feet from the doorway without a single sound. He didn't touch Jasper. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. His presence was a physical force, a drop in temperature, a suffocation of all the air in the hallway. He simply placed his hand on my shoulder. It was a heavy hand, warm, solid, and utterly immovable. It was a brand. It was a claim. It was an anchor in the middle of my panic. Jasper froze, his hand still outstretched, his eyes wide with a new, more profound terror. Darius looked at Jasper Teal, his steel blue eyes flat and dead. She said no. The 3 words hung in the silence. And in that second, the lantern photographer, sensing the real drama had moved, rounded the corner. Pop! A flashbulb exploded, a brutal, blinding point of white light that turned the hallway into a stark, overexposed photograph. I cried out, throwing a hand up to shield my eyes. Instantly, Darius moved. He didn't strike out. He didn't attack the photographer. He turned, his body moving with a fluid, protective grace. He angled himself between me and the camera, his larger frame completely eclipsing me. He leaned in, pulling me slightly behind him, his shoulder shielding my face from the after images of the flash. His face was inches from mine, a mask of cold, controlled fury, but it was all directed outward, at the world, not at me. "This way," he murmured, his voice a low vibration against my ear. His hand slid from my shoulder, down my arm, his fingers finding mine and lacing through them. A jolt, like an electric current, shot up my arm. He didn't pull me back into the chaos of the hall. He pulled me toward a narrow, unmarked glass door at the end of the corridor. He shoved it open, and we fell out of the oppressive silence and into the roar of the wind. We were on a balcony, a small, concrete slab of a place, suspended over the black, churning water of the harbor, the gala, the lights, the danger. It all vanished, muffled behind the heavy glass. There was only the sound of the wind, a high-pitched, lonely howl, and the distant, mournful cry of a foghorn. The air was cold. It was a wet, heavy cold that cut through my thin linen coat. It smelled of salt, diesel, and the deep, metallic tang of the open water. It instantly whipped my hair across my face, stinging my eyes and my cheeks. I was shaking. The adrenaline from the confrontation with Jasper, the shock of the camera, the overwhelming proximity of Darius, it all hit me at once. I was trembling, my teeth chattering, and I couldn't stop. Darius let go of my hand and stepped in front of me, his body a solid wall, blocking the worst of the wind. He was silent for a long moment, just watching me, his face cast in the dim, ambient light from the city below. He was letting me breathe, letting me recalibrate. "You're cold," he said. It wasn't a question. I just nodded, wrapping my arms around myself, trying to hold myself together. He lifted his hand. He did it slowly, deliberately, giving me every opportunity to flinch, to pull away. I watched, my breath caught in my throat. His fingers, the ones that had been so warm in the car, were cool now from the night air. He didn't grab. He didn't caress. He gently, with an almost unbelievable tenderness, brushed the strands of hair that were plastered to my cheek by the wind and my tears. His knuckles, just the lightest grays, swept across my skin. I stopped breathing. It was the kindest, most intentional touch I had felt in years. His fingers traced the line of my jaw, which was tight with cold intention. His hand came to rest on my cheek, his palm cupping my face. His thumb swept, just once, under my eye, brushing away a tear the wind had whipped there. His eyes, those steel blue, analytical eyes, were searching mine. They weren't cold now. They were deep and dark and full of a question he wouldn't ask. "I'm scared," I whispered. The wind almost stole the words from my mouth. I'm terrified. Darius, of Teal, of Price, of all of this." I didn't look away. I had to make him understand. But I'm here, I'm standing here, because I choose to be. I chose to walk away from Mace. I chose to talk to Teal. I chose this. I watched his face. I saw the muscles in his jaw clench, then, impossibly, soften, the ice in his gaze, the permanent shield, didn't just thaw, it fractured. It was replaced by something raw, something vulnerable, something that looked like respect. He gave a small, sharp nod. It was a concession. It was an acceptance. He wasn't my savior, not in this moment. He was acknowledging my command. He leaned in. He moved with agonizing slowness. There was no rush, no force, no demand. He was giving me every second, every fraction of a second, to turn my head, to push him away, to say no. My heart was a fist, slamming against my ribs. Thump, thump, thump. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I didn't back away. My entire body was screaming yes. I lifted my chin, just a fraction, closing the last impossible inch. His lips brushed mine. It wasn't a kiss. It was a ghost of a touch, a question, a breath of impossible warmth against my cold, numb skin. He paused, his mouth hovering just over mine, waiting. A small, shaky sigh escaped me. He took that as his answer. His lips pressed against mine, firmer now, but still devastatingly gentle. It was a slow, deep, searching pressure. It wasn't hungry. It was reverent. His other hand came up, not to grab, but to mirror the first, his palms cupping my face, his thumbs rubbing slow, soothing circles on my temples. He held my face as if it were something priceless, something he was terrified of breaking. His hands were safe. They stayed on my face, his fingers sliding into my hair, holding me steady as the wind howled around us. He didn't move to my body. He didn't try to pull me closer. He kept the boundary. All the intensity, all the fire was in his mouth. The world dissolved. There was no gala. There was no price. There was no Kovac union. There was only the cold, salty wind on my skin and the impossible, electric warmth of his mouth. It was a promise. It was an anchor. It was the first safe place I had been in my entire life. And this was not a rescue. It was a choice. I kissed him back. I stopped being the girl who was being kissed. I met his pressure. I tilted my head, my mouth softening under his. Answering him, I lifted my own hands, my fingers no longer trembling. I pressed my palm flat against his chest. Under the fine wool of his tuxedo, beneath the crisp cotton of his shirt, his heart was pounding. It wasn't the calm, steady, measured beat of the man in control. It was a frantic, wild, runaway rhythm. It was hammering just as hard as mine. He wasn't made of steel. He was real. The knowledge sent a wave of bravery, of sheer, giddy power through me. I leaned into him, my body finally uncoiling, my shoulders, which had been hunched against the cold and the fear for what felt like a lifetime, finally relaxed. I trusted him. In this one, insane, impossible moment, I trusted him. We broke apart, not because we wanted to, but because we had to. We were both gasping, the cold air stinging our lips, our breath pluming in the dark. We were inches apart. His hands were still holding my face. My hand was still pressed flat against his thundering heart. A small, almost invisible smile touched the corner of his mouth. It was raw and real and utterly disarming. He touched his forehead to mine, his eyes closing for just a second. "Ren," he whispered, his voice rough, broken. Anytime you say stop. We stop. This is your choice. Always." He was giving me the one thing no one else ever had, absolute control. "Pop, The flash exploded from the glass door. The photographer, the real world, came crashing back. We sprang apart, but not fully. "Damn it," Darius cursed, a low, soft sound. He turned, his body instinctively shielding me again, but as he turned, his hand found mine. He didn't just grab it. He threaded his fingers through mine, a solid, warm, interlocking grip, a grip that said, "Partner." He looked at me, his eyes clear and sharp again. The man on the balcony was gone. The warrior was back. But he didn't let go of my hand. He held it tight. "Back to the light," he said. We stepped back through the door, out of the wind, into the stunned, silent hallway. We were no longer the mafia boss and the girl he was saving. We were two people, hand in hand, walking back into a war, together. We stepped back into the hallway, our hands locked together. The photographer was gone, already running back to the main hall, no doubt sensing the next explosion. Jasper Teal was gone, too, vanished. But Mace was there, standing with Sarah Nix. Sarah was holding a tablet, her face grim but triumphant. "It's done," she said, her voice tight with adrenaline. The 60-second delay just broadcast, the entire room, and everyone watching the charity stream, just saw Deputy Director Price threaten an unrepresented witness. They saw him attempt to coerce you into signing a blank evidence form. "And?" Darius asked, his voice low. "And?" Sarah said, a thin, sharp smile touching her lips. "I just received an alert. The Port Authority Ethics Committee has invoked an emergency session. They're convening now. Price's career is over." It should have felt like a victory, but before I could even process the relief, a new fire erupted. One of the donors, a woman in a glittering silver dress, was staring at her phone, her hand over her mouth. She looked up, her eyes wide with horror, and she was looking right at Darius. "It's him," she whispered, loud enough to carry. "That's him. It's all over the feeds." Mace's new phone, the one he'd given me a clone of, buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out, his face darkening. "Boss, we have a problem, a big one." He turned the screen. A new video clip was tearing through social media. It was grainy, dark, and shot from a high angle. It showed the alley behind Saffron and Slate, 3 nights ago. It showed Darius shoving the kitchen door open. It showed him pulling me, stumbling into the alley. It showed him pushing me toward the black Sedna. The clip was only 10 seconds long, silent and viciously edited. The caption read, "Mafia Boss Darius Viscari kidnaps missing baker Ren Calloway." Kovac. It was their counterpunch. They hadn't just relied on Teal. They'd been sitting on this. They were recasting the entire narrative. I wasn't a witness. I was a hostage. "They're framing you," I whispered, my stomach turning to ice. "They're turning you into the criminal?" Price, who had been huddled with his remaining agents, saw his opening. He barked a laugh, his confidence flooding back. "Well, well, well," he boomed, striding back toward us. "It seems we have a developing situation, a kidnapping." Darius didn't even look at him. He was looking at Mace. His expression was utterly cold, devoid of panic. He was a general calculating his next move. "They're trying to invalidate your testimony," he said to me, his voice calm, "by painting you as a victim of Stockholm Syndrome, a hostage." "Sarah," Darius commanded, "open the vault." Sarah's fingers flew across her tablet. "Which file?" "All of it," he said. "The full, unedited video from Saffron and Slate, the audio from the greenhouse, the high-resolution scans of the forgeries. Send the master key for the Oriole Vault directly to the Halcyon Lantern and the Ethics Committee. Right now, no more delays, no more traps. We go fully public." "Darius," Sarah warned, "that's everything. That's the whole war." "They just fired their last bullet," Darius said. "Now we fire ours." While Sarah typed, Mace moved. He and 2 other men from the Viscari volunteer team had cornered Jasper Teal before he could make it to the parking garage. They had him penned in a small pantry, the door blocked. Mace was holding a small, black device, a high-frequency audio recorder. "He's making the call," Mace said to Darius through his earpiece, which we could all hear. We listened. We heard Teal's terrified, reedy voice. It's Teal. The plan failed. The girl, she's with Vescari. She's talking. Price lost control. A synthesized, metallic voice replied from the encrypted app. He lost control, or Iago failed. Iago, Price, all of them. It's a disaster, Teal shrieked. She's telling everyone. The BUI connection, everything. Then the plan changes, the synthesized voice said. Price is authorized. Move to asset denial. Secure the girl. If you cannot secure her, terminate you, Teal. You are now a liability. Do not be found. The call clicked off. Sarah Nix looked up from her tablet. The logs are authenticated. The call metadata is captured. It's done. They just gave the order. Price must have gotten the same message. He stormed back into the main hall, his face a mask of righteous fury. He was no longer a humiliated bureaucrat. He was a hero, launching a rescue. This event is over, he shouted, his voice cracking with authority. This woman, Wren Calloway, is the victim of a kidnapping. The BUI is taking her into protective custody now. His agents moved, pushing through the stunned crowd. They weren't coming for the cake anymore. They were coming for me. Mace and Sarah flanked me, forming a protective triangle. But Darius didn't hunker down. He let go of my hand, took 3 steps forward, and stood directly in their path. He was on the edge of the small red carpet that led to the auction stage. He wasn't aggressive. He wasn't threatening. He just stood there, his hands open at his sides, his head high. It was a posture of absolute defiance. He was a mountain. You will not touch her, he said. His voice was quiet, but it carried in the vast, silent room. She is a material witness and a kidnap victim, Price shouted. Stand aside, Vescari, or you will be charged with kidnapping, accessory to murder, and obstruction of a federal investigation. The lantern photographer was right there, his camera flashing, capturing the tableau, the corrupt official, the mafia boss, and the terrified baker in the middle. She is a private citizen, Darius said, his voice as cold and clear as a winter morning. She is represented by counsel, and she is in the middle of 1,000 witnesses. You will not be taking her anywhere. He tilted his head. You want to put cuffs on her? You want to drag her out of here? Then you will have to go through her lawyer, and you will have to do it on camera. He held his ground. Lawyer first, he said, cuffs later. The crowd, which had been confused, terrified, and suspicious, began to shift. They saw what I saw: a man, whatever his reputation, standing between a terrified woman and a group of aggressive, overreaching federal agents. A single person began to clap, then another, then another. Within 10 seconds, the entire gala hall was filled with applause. They were clapping for him, for the man who had just stood up to the BUI. Price was shaking with rage. He had lost the room. He had lost the narrative, and he knew it. But this was not Darius's victory. It was mine. He had given me the opening. He had given me the shield. Now, I had to be the voice. I stepped out from behind Sarah. I walked to the center of the red carpet and stood next to Darius. I felt his surprise, a slight tensing of his shoulder. I didn't take his hand. I didn't need to. I faced Price. I am not a hostage, I said, my voice ringing out, clear and strong. The room fell silent again. I am not a victim of Darius Vescari. I am a victim of you, Director Price, and of the Kovacs Union, and of Jasper Teal. I pointed to Price. You are not taking me into protective custody. You are trying to silence me, because I am the evidence. I took a deep breath. This was it, my choice. I am not going anywhere tonight, I declared, but I will testify publicly. I will agree to be a witness in a safe public place tomorrow morning, 9 o'clock, at the White Sand Tower, in front of the Ethics Committee and any reporter who wants to be there. I had just called their bluff. I had named the time and the place. A public building, in broad daylight, the one thing they couldn't control. Price's face was a terrible sight. He was trapped. He was on camera. The entire elite of Port Halcyon was watching him. He couldn't refuse a voluntary public testimony. He couldn't arrest me without starting a riot. He stared at me, his eyes promising murder. 9 o'clock, he hissed, the words ground out between his teeth. White Sand Tower, we will secure the location. He turned to his agents. We're leaving. He barked the order, and his team retreated, pushing their way back through the crowd, a wave of dark suits receding in humiliation. The room exploded. People were shouting, clapping, rushing forward. Reporters were screaming my name, shoving microphones in my face. Ren, is it true? The BUI, the Kovac? Mr. Viscari. What is your relationship with Miss Calloway? I was drowning. The lights were blinding. The noise was a physical weight. I felt a hand on my back, warm and solid. Darius? He leaned in, his mouth at my ear, his voice a low, secret rumble under the roar. Plan B, Ren. It's already in motion. I looked up at him. The public, controlled mask was back on, but as our eyes met, he gave me a single, slow, almost invisible wink. He grabbed my hand, lacing his fingers through mine. It wasn't the tender, exploratory touch from the balcony. This was a statement, a public declaration of alliance. He turned, pulling me with him, and began to move through the crowd. Mace and Sarah formed a wedge in front of us. We didn't run. We walked. We walked down the center of the red carpet, through the heart of the gala. Our hands locked together. The flashbulbs were relentless, a wall of strobing white light that turned our exit into a series of stop-motion photographs. We were the story, the mafia boss and the baker girl, walking hand in hand out of the fire and into the war. The night was a void. The adrenaline from the gala had drained away, leaving a humming, high-wired exhaustion. We were back in the greenhouse on the museum roof, but the peace was gone. The rain had stopped, and the city was a silent, glittering map of enemy territory. Sarah Nix sat across from me at the steel table, a single lamp burning between us, creating a small, harsh bubble of light. In front of me was a yellow legal pad and a pen. "Don't write what you feel," Sarah instructed, her voice soft but firm. It was 3 o'clock in the morning. "Write what you saw, what you signed, what he said. Facts, dates, times. They can argue with your fear. They can't argue with a timeline." So I wrote about the day Jasper Teal hired me. I wrote about the afternoon he'd slid the credit card application across the bakery counter, calling it a formality. I wrote about the late-night cash deposits. I wrote about the smell of the unmarked bags he'd called specialty flour. I wrote without adjectives. I wrote without emotion. But the facts themselves were a condemnation. My voice, the one I had found on the microphone, was hardening on the page. It wasn't the voice of a victim. It was the voice of a witness. This statement was my weapon. While I wrote, Darius and Mace worked. They stood on the other side of the room, near the glass wall, their faces illuminated by the pale blue glow of a tablet. They spoke in low, clipped tones, orchestrating the next day's war. "The White Sand Tower," Darius said, his voice a low rumble. "Price confirmed it. He thinks he's setting a trap." "He is," Mace grunted. "The garage is a kill box. One way in, one way out. He'll have BUI agents at the gate, but the interior security will be Kovac's," Darius finished. "He's planning to have his civilian security unit take Ren from the BUI agents, a staged, internal abduction. Price gets to claim he was ambushed. Kovac gets the witness." "So we don't go to the garage," Mace said. It wasn't a question. "No," Darius said. "We give them what they're expecting. At 8:45 a.m., a 3-car convoy of black Sednas will leave this museum. They will drive directly to the White Sand Tower. They will enter the garage, and they will be empty." "Price's men will stop the convoy," Mace said. "And while they are busy tearing apart 3 empty cars in the garage," Darius said, "Ren will be a mile away." He looked over at me, at the yellow pad. "She goes in the front door, publicly, but not with us." Sarah looked up. "How?" "The elevated train," Darius said. "The 9 o'clock commuter run. It stops directly opposite the tower's main plaza. She'll be just another face in the crowd. She won't be alone, Sarah stated. She'll have you, Darius confirmed. And she'll have Sal, my father's old consigliere. He looks like a retired baker. He's 75 years old. He hasn't left his house in 5 years. He will be her uncle. No one will look twice at an old man, a lawyer, and a young woman. And the BUI, I asked, my voice hoarse from hours of silence. They'll be watching for me. My phone. My phone, Mace corrected. The one I gave you at 8:50 a.m. I will activate a spoofer. To anyone watching, that phone will look like it's in the lead Sedna. They will track it all the way into the garage. They won't know they're wrong until it's too late, and you're already standing on the plaza. The layers of the plan were settling around me, a complex, tactical defense. The Kovac cops, Sarah said. How do we identify them? Darius's face was grim. We already have. This morning, Kovac hired 20 private security officers for a one-day contract at the tower. We have their names. We have their new fake badge numbers. He looked at Mace. Dawn, leak the entire roster, names and badge numbers, send it to the Lantern, anonymously. By the time Ren arrives, every real cop in the city will be looking for Kovac's fake ones. A low-frequency alert chimed from Mace's tablet. He stiffened, reading the screen. He turned the tablet to Darius. I couldn't see the screen. I just saw the shift in Darius's posture. He went from a general to a block of ice. Iago, he said. The name was a curse. It's confirmed, Mace said, his voice gravel. He just sent a text. From a burner, Iago Trent. He's at the tower. He's coordinating Price's BUI team with Kovac's private security. He pointed to a small, blurry photograph on the screen. That's his phone. He's detailing the trap in the garage. He's confirming that you will be with Ren. My blood ran cold. The mole. The man Darius had known about. The man who was now setting a trap for him. Boss, Mace said, his voice urgent. We burn him. Now. I'll make the call. We can have him picked up in 5 minutes. Darius was silent. He stared at the screen, at the betrayal, at the picture of the text that was meant to be his death warrant. He was calculating. I could see the cold, brutal math happening behind his steel blue eyes. Burn Iago now, and the trap in the garage would dissolve, but the head of the snake, the one Iago was reporting to, would remain hidden. Or let him run. Let Iago spring his trap. No, Darius said, his voice flat and final. Darius, Mace growled. He's setting you up. He's telling them you'll be in the car. I know, Darius said, and they will be expecting me. They will focus all their energy, all their men, on that garage, waiting for me to step out of that car. They will be so focused on the Vascari syndicate. They won't even see the baker coming. He was accepting the risk. He was painting the target on his own back, on the empty decoy cars, to guarantee my safe passage. He was using his own mole against him. The plan holds, Darius said. Iago stays in play. The sun rose over Port Halcyon with a sick, gray light. A cold, misty drizzle was falling, clinging to the glass of the greenhouse. The city woke up, unaware, its citizens starting their commutes, buying coffee, Ninno. I stood by the elevator, ready. I was not the girl from the restaurant. I wore a simple pair of dark trousers, the black flats, and a plain gray wool coat. No borrowed dress, no baker's whites. I was just Ren Calloway. Sarah stood beside me, holding a leather briefcase. In it was the original 10-page handwritten statement and the binder of forged documents. Sal was waiting for us downstairs. I held a small, white cardboard box in my hands. I had baked last night, in the small hours. While I wrote, I'd needed my hands to be busy. I'd needed to remember who I was. Inside was a simple pastry, a truth cake. I'd called it just a small, laminated brioche, but I'd rolled it with coarse, gray sea salt and shards of caramelized sugar, crispy and hard on the outside, soft, salty, and complex on the inside. It was a reminder. The truth isn't always sweet. My new phone, the one that was about to be cloned, buzzed in my pocket, a new message from Darius. I opened it, just one line. If you don't see me, read paragraph 3. My breath hitched. I pulled out my copy of the statement. Paragraph 3. It wasn't the part about the forgery. It wasn't the part about the BUI. It was the part about my mother. The part about dying under a mountain of abstract, crushing debt. The part that humanized me, that explained why I was a target. It was the part that had nothing to do with him, and everything to do with me. If you don't see me, he was telling me that if he fell, if the trap in the garage went wrong, if Iago's betrayal succeeded, I was to save myself, not with his strength, but with my own. The elevator doors opened. It was time to go. The elevated train was 2 blocks away, its high, mournful horn cutting through the morning mist. Port Halcyon was holding its breath. It was waiting for a camera to click, for a story to end. I put the phone in my pocket, held the box of pastry in my left hand, and stepped into the elevator with Sarah. We walked into the White Sand Tower at exactly 9 o'clock. The main plaza was a chaos of reporters, held back by a line of real city police. We were met by a panicked-looking BUI agent. "Miss Calloway, Director Price," the agent stammered, avoiding Sierra's eyes. "The hearing room, it's been moved. We had a threat. For your safety, we're using the secure conference room in the basement." Price's move, and he was shifting the location from the public, glass-walled hearing room to a concrete bunker. Sarah didn't miss a beat. "We'll need to see the threat assessment," she said, already walking. As we were led to the elevators, my new phone buzzed, a news alert from the Halcyon Lantern. The headline read, "By moves witness. Are they protecting her or hiding her?" Below it, the Lantern had published the tower's publicly available building schematics. A dotted red line was already tracking our movement toward the basement elevator, a live stream. The entire city was watching a digital map of Price leading the witness into the dark. Darkness can't swallow a person who is already seen. The elevator opened into a low-ceilinged, concrete hallway that smelled of bleach and cold air. At the end, Iago Trent stood guard outside a heavy steel door. He nodded, his face pale, and opened it. The room was gray, a single long metal table, no windows. Director Price was waiting inside, looking smug. He had us. "We'll need a moment alone with the witness," Price said, smiling at Sarah. "A private reception before the testimony." "Absolutely not," Sarah said. She walked to the center of the metal table and placed her leather briefcase on it. She snapped it open. She didn't pull out my statement. She pulled out a small, black digital recorder and set it on the table. With a precise, defiant click, she pressed the record button. A tiny red light began to blink. "This hearing is now on the record," she announced. Price's smile vanished. He looked at Iago. "Secure the room, Trent." Iago stepped back and shoved the heavy steel door. It closed with a deep, final thud. The sound of the lock turning echoed in the small, concrete room. I turned. Iago wasn't looking at the door. He was looking at Price, and his hand was moving. Not for a badge. He pulled a black, unregistered pistol from the small of his back. "Director," Iago said, his voice shaking but his hand steady. "Kovac sends his regards. This is over." He was going to kill us all. Price, Sarah, and me. The perfect cleanup. A second door, one I hadn't seen, marked HVAC access, hissed open behind him. Darius Vascari stepped into the room. He wasn't in a suit. He was wearing dark trousers and a torn, dark shirt. His knuckles were raw and split. His left eyebrow was bleeding, a thin trickle of red tracking down his temple. He'd been in the garage. He'd been the diversion. He was the bait, and he was unarmed. He held a single, clear plastic evidence bag in his right hand. Iago froze, his gun trapped between Price and this new, impossible threat. "You're sloppy, Iago," Darius said. His voice was calm, almost conversational, though he never took his eyes off the gun. He walked forward, ignoring the weapon, and placed the evidence bag on the table, right next to Sarah's blinking recorder. "The complete Crimson Yeast file," Darius announced, "for the mic." He emptied the bag, The forged application, the bank statements, the money trail, and this, he said, dropping a small digital audio player. He pressed play. Teal's terrified, synthesized voice filled the room. Terminate you, Teal. You are now a liability. Sarah leaned forward. All items logged, time-stamped, and recording, she stated clearly. Price's face was chalk white. He looked from the gun to the evidence. He screamed, "Arrest them! Arrest all of them! Iago, shoot him! That's an order!" The main door burst open. Not one man, but four. Kovac's fake civilian security team, guns drawn, ready to execute the witnesses. But they stopped dead. They had run straight into a wall of men in dark, conservative suits who had been waiting in the hall. The Ethics Committee Task Force. "BUI, stand down," the lead agent shouted, his own weapon raised. "This is a jurisdictional seizure. All BUI agents are to be detained." It was beautiful. It was the perfect trap. The fake cops, hired by Kovac, were staring at the real investigators, invited by Darius. Price's ambush had been swallowed by a larger one. In the ensuing chaos, I saw Mace, flanked by two real, uniformed city police officers, escorting Jasper Teal into the room in handcuffs. Iago Trent stood alone, his gun arm lowering, defeated. He looked at Darius. He was a dead man, caught between two syndicates, and he was looking for his judgment. Darius stepped close to him. He didn't whisper. He spoke just loud enough for the recorder to hear him. "You were compromised," Darius said, his voice low and hard. "But you chose to plead guilty. You chose to protect civilians. You have a way back." A way back? He was offering him a deal. Iago stared, his eyes wide with disbelief. He slowly, agonizingly placed his pistol on the metal table. Then he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small, encrypted hard drive. "Kovac's main ledger," Iago said, his voice hoarse. "All his offshore accounts. The codes are on the drive." Price saw it. He saw the file. He saw the gun. He saw his entire world collapse. He tore the plastic ID badge from his suit pocket and made a desperate, scrambling run for the open door. I didn't think. I just moved. I stepped right into his path. He slammed into me. I didn't budge. The girl who was too broke for a taxi, the girl who had been starving in a restaurant booth, was now an immovable object. Price stared at me, his eyes wild with animal panic. I leaned in, toward the blinking red light of Sierra's recorder. "You tried to put handcuffs on a woman," I said, my voice clear and cold. "Over a cake." The sentence hung in the air. A uniformed city police officer stepped behind Price, his face like stone. "Kellen Price," the officer said, "you're under arrest for conspiracy, obstruction, and attempted kidnapping." The BUI was placed under independent review. The Kovac security ring was shattered. It was over. The room, which had been a vortex of noise, fell utterly silent. The only sound was the faint hum of the fluorescent lights. Darius was leaning against the table, his hand pressed to his side. He was hurt from the fight in the garage. He looked exhausted and bruised and bloody and completely real. He looked at me. Across the table, littered with evidence and a traitor's gun. The ice was gone from his eyes. A small, pained smile touched his lips. "So," he said, his voice rough, "do you still want to bake memory cakes? Ren." I walked to him. I walked past the cops, past Sarah, past the men in suits. I stopped in front of him. I saw the cut on his brow, the split skin on his knuckles. I lifted my hand. I didn't touch him to see if he was okay. I didn't touch him to say thank you for saving me. I touched him because he had given me a choice, because he had trusted me with his war. I touched him because he was my partner. My fingers, faintly dusty with flour from the pastry I still held in my other hand, brushed the hair back from his temple, tracing the line of the cut. He didn't flinch. He just closed his eyes for a second, a long, shuddering breath leaving him, leaning into my touch. This wasn't the dark, windy balcony. This was a harsh, bright, public room, filled with witnesses. He opened his eyes. I kissed him. It was a mutual act, a claiming. It wasn't gentle. It was deep, and it was long, and it was a promise. It was the end of the fear. His hands came up, not to my face this time, but to my waist, pulling me in, holding me solid against him. My hand left his face and wrapped around his neck, holding him. It was a kiss of truth, of survival, of a future, made in the bright, unforgiving light of day, punctuated by the sudden flashing pop of the halcyon lantern photographer's camera. The story didn't end there. It just started. I opened my bakery, right in Arbor Key. I called it Halcyon Proof. It was a play on words, proof of the truth and the proofing of the dough. 25% of our profits go to the Port Halcyon Community Legal Fund. Darius, he didn't stop being Darius, but the Vescari Syndicate vanished. In its place, the Vescari Foundation for Urban Justice appeared. He still fought. He still acquired. But he was fighting for the city's contracts, not its shadows. I still have the receipt. It's in a small black frame by the register. Poor girl wrote help on the bill. It's a reminder. Our story isn't over. We're just writing new terms on a new, clean page. And this time, we're holding hands. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I would love to know where you are listening from, so please comment below and share your thoughts. If you enjoyed this journey, please subscribe to my channel, Mafia Boss Stories, like this video, and support us by pressing the hype button so this story can be heard by even more people.